everyone. I am Colonel Shantanu Roy from Fearless Leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have seen in my previous videos on the various Indo-Pak wars, India has always dealt a crushing blow and defeated Pakistan in all the previous 3 wars. So, even in KARGIL, that is Op Vijay, which was fought in 1999, again India and its esteemed army thwarted the villainous attempts of Pakistan, its political machinery and its army. And Pakistan had to save its face in the international arena after the Kargil war. In this war, our army had to eliminate the Pakistan army regulars and the irregular Mujahideens who had come over and taken stance on the icy heights overlooking the Srinagar-Leh highway so that they could dominate that area. The Mujahideens, along with the Pak army regulars, had infiltrated and taken over these old unused bunkers by the Indian army. This conflict was basically triggered off by this infiltration of the Pak Mujahideens assisted by the Pak army regulars. Though initially when the war broke out, Pakistan denied any role of the Pak army, but then there were teleconversations between senior officials like the Prime Minister and generals of the army, and also documents were seized after these heights were captured, which showed the full involvement of the Pak army, and it was a regular action and plan by the Pak army and the top echelons of the armed forces of Pakistan at that time. They say that the political machinery was not aware, though the militia says that they had informed the Prime Minister of all the plans at that point of time. This was basically a localized war which, if had not been contained, would have had greater repercussions and would have snowballed into a much bigger conflict on many other fronts and would have had major effects on the world over and in the international arena. So, where is this much talked about KARGIL basically? Before partition in 1947, KARGIL was a small little tehsil in Ladakh which was sparsely populated at diverse linguistic and religious groups. They were small little villages which were separated by the high mountain ridges and ranges of the Himalayas. After the 47-48 conflict of India and Pakistan, when the armies fought and the POK was formed and the LOC created at the line of ceasefire, this is the time when the towns of Skardu and Gilgit went into the so-called Azad Kashmir, and Kargil, Dras was captured back and are in the map of India. Kargil is basically 206 kilometers from Srinagar on the Srinagar-Leh National Highway, which passes through the Jozila Pass, and this highway goes ahead on towards Leh and down to Manali, which is a longer route to Kargil. And from Skardu it is about 177 kilometers. So the Pakistanis thought of taking over these heights, cutting off the Srinagar Lake Highway, and in consequence try to dislodge the Indian army from the Siachen glacier so that they could have full control over that area and also the Leh Valley. This area has temperatures dipping down to minus 48 degrees centigrade, so making it very hostile for human to live in. Also, the battle spread over to the Mashko Valley, the Batalik sector, and also to Dras. So this was the areas where the Kargil War in 1909 was basically fought. Now, what was the genesis of the blunder created by Pakistan? After 1971 and the liberation of Bangladesh, happened the Shimla Agreement of 1972, where it was decided that both the countries will not take a offensive posture towards each other, and there was no exchange of any kind of military actions between both the nations. But then in 1980 there were skirmishes along different sectors at Siachen, and then in 1990 separatist activities happened in Kashmir, and then tensions started off and J&K became a terrorist-ridden state where a lot of insurgency problems cropped up. Thus, to keep these activities in check, the Lahore Declaration of 1999 was signed, and Atal Bihari travelled to Lahore in the Aman Ki Yatra bus, and this is the time or just after it that Pakistani were already planning their villainous covert activities, and Kargil happened just after that in May 1999. It is said that the infiltrations had already started in April when this yatra or bus journey by Vajpayee ji was taking place. So you can understand that there is something in the front and other happenings at the back which stab you. Though the political machinery of Pakistan claims that they were not aware and it was totally an action by the infiltrators, but like I brought it out, the documents were seized, tapes were found out or caught on by the intelligence, and also, like General Malik says, that these activities had already been planned in the 80s and the 90s, and the Pak military had projected these to Ziaul Haq and Benazir Bhutto, but they were shelved off because this could have culminated into an all-out war which was avoidable by both the countries and not good for the Southeast Asian region. Then in 98, both the countries tested out the nuclear capabilities. So basically an all-out war could snowball into a nuclear war which could be much more devastating. That is the reason why both the countries constrained itself and did not take any military offensive action. Now, ladies and gentlemen, after having given out the genesis of this localized war, let me give you the actions that happened during the Kargil war. This war can be divided into basically the three stages. The first stage is basically occupation of the ridge lines which happened very covertly. It is said that in February 1999, the Pakistan Army sent about 7 battalions of the North Light Infantry onto these ridges that is about 137 in number, along the Srinagar-Leh highway, where they infiltrated over a period of time, over these 4-5 months of summers, and entrenched themselves in the old unused bunkers. These regulars of the Pak army were basically helped by the infiltrators and the Mujahideens, but it was basically an army action and not just by the infiltrators as bought out by Pakistan. This action happened along the heights of Lower Mashko Valley, Marpo ridgeline in Dras, the Kaksar area near Kargil, the Batalik sector east of Indus River, on the heights of Chorbala, where the LOC turns north, and in the Turluk sector south of the Siachen area. So after these infiltrations were done by Pakistan, and also these were not basically detected by the Indian Army, maybe because the patrolling in that area due to the hostile temperature and terrain was not very proactive, and there were some little loopholes of intelligence, and even if these infiltrations were cited and reported, not taken very seriously because they were thought to be infiltrators which were being eliminated, and also these infiltrations were basically covered up by heavy Pak arty fire. So these went unseen and unheeded. In May 1999, in the Batalik sector, some infiltration was reported by the shepherds of that area, and Captain Saurav Kalia with his patrol was detailed to go and check it out, and this was the time when this patrol was captured by the Pakistani army, and these brave soldiers were tortured and killed, and when these bodies were returned, they were seen to be physically badly tortured, their eyes gouged out, their private parts burnt, and cigarette burns and what not. Initially it was thought that these were infiltrations and would be just evicted out without no time and without much of resistance. But after this incident of Captain Saurav Kala, it was seen that it was much more than any infiltration, and this was the time when the Indian Army decided to wage a full war, and about 2 lakh soldiers were mobilized in that area to take action to evict these infiltrators. And that is the time when we realized that the heights all along the Srinagar-Leh highway up to Dras had been taken over by these Pakistani regulars, and a localized war called the Kargil War or the Op Vijay by the Indian Army was formally launched. Due to the terrain, the army could not mobilize corps or commands in that area, so the battle had to be fought at the brigade and the battalion level only. 2 divisions, that is about 20,000 soldiers, were launched into battle, and in assistance were about 7,000 paramilitary force Jawans also, who supported the Indian Army in the success of the Op Vijay. Then started the hazardous and difficult task of eviction of these infiltrators from these heights, which were all 5,000 plus meters, and this was being done by the battalion level actions, which were very difficult, as any daytime attack would be thwarted off by the Pakistani infiltrators who were well entrenched in the bunkers. So all the action had to be done only during the night time, which was even more dangerous because the heights and the climb were precarious and very dangerous. The hills were very steep and very difficult to negotiate. But at this stage, our soldiers were not to be deterred off or scared, and they launched each attack and started capturing each height in sequence as planned out. The Indian Army then very clinically started capturing each of the posts like the 4590, 5353, Tololing, Tiger Hill, and other such major heights. The battalion activity, like I brought out, was very difficult. So on 26th of May, the Indian Air Force also was incorporated, and they launched Operation Safed Sagar, which means the White Sea, and the Air Force got its orders to attack the hills but not to cross the LOC, because crossing of the LOC by the Air Force would have resulted in dire consequences of a all-out battle, which was to be avoided. Initially, the choppers or the strike helicopters were requisitioned to shoot onto these bunkers, and the Mi-8s were quite a bit successful but not very, and the Pakistani armies were assisted by the NTPQ 36 firefinder radars and a heavy barrage of mortar, artillery and anti-aircraft guns. So this made the action by the battalions to capture the heights and the choppers difficult, as they also were shooting down the choppers by Stinger missiles. These attack hepters also had problems in flying at such high altitudes due to the rarefied atmosphere. In this also, the Navy was incorporated by the armed forces, and the Western and Eastern fleets both incorporated itself and deployed themselves on the North Arabian Sea, and aggressive patrolling was done by them to cut off the Pakistan sea trade, and also in case of any action out of Karachi port. The Navy was very effective in that area, and no naval action by the Pakistanis could be taken up. Once India regained control of the hills and the heights overraining the National Highway 1, the Indian Army turned to driving back the invading infiltrators from the line of control, and the Battle of Tololing was then fought, and later Tiger Hill, that is .5140, fell, thus culminating the war. But then taking over these hills by the battalions, like I brought out, was extremely difficult, because they were thoroughly entrenched in more than about 130 odd heights, and each height was overlooking each other. So battalion attacks were literally not feasible. The Indian Air Force was incorporated. Initially, the hepters were fielded with a embargo of their not crossing the LOC. But this was not very successful, and the fighters had to be pitched into the battle. And in the bargain, we lost a MiG-21 fighter pilot, squadron leader Ajay Ahuja, and also a MiG-27 strike aircraft in which Flight Lieutenant Nachiketa became a prisoner of war and was later on returned. Like has been the habit of Pakistan, squadron leader Ahuja's body, when later returned back, was riddled with bullets, which shows that he had bailed out of his aircraft safely but was killed when captured. Also, a Mi-8 helicopter was brought down by a Stinger surface-to-air missile. So basically, these aircraft attacks were not very successful because they were thwarted off by the artillery fire and well-entrenched anti-aircraft guns. This was the time when non-stop bombing on these entrenched bunkers was done by the Mirage 2000s, which was very effective and helped our battalion level attacks to succeed and take over these bunkers, and thus pushing back these infiltrators. And on the 26th of, so 2 months into the conflict, India had taken over about 80% of the entrenched or infiltrated heights and pushed back these Pakistan army troops down into their territory. This was the time when Bruce Riedel, an aide to Bill Clinton, saw movement of Pakistani nuclear warheads towards this sector. He saw these in satellite imageries which were released to the President of US's office by the US satellites. He immediately informed Bill Clinton, who in turn sent across a message to the Pakistan Prime Minister of that time, Nawaz Sharif, to stop these movement of warheads and withdraw his troop back. Though Nawaz Sharif says that he was not informed of the activities, but then it is his responsibility, and Nawaz Sharif ordered his army to stop the battle and, under pressure from the international field, withdrew his troops. So on 26th of July, a ceasefire was called, and that is the Kargil Vijay Divas of Op Vijay. So that was the Kargil Vijay Divas, or the day of victory and culmination of Op Vijay. And on 26th July, after the ceasefire, there was a decision for both the sides to roll back to the original line of control and not cross over and create any offensive military action in these areas. In this war, Pakistani lost its face in the international arena because in the initial phases of the war, Pakistan continuously kept saying that this was basically action by infiltrators. But later on, it was found out that it was the Pak army, and then the Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif kept saying that he was not aware of any such actions, though General Pervez Musharraf, the Chief of Army at that time, says he did everything with his Prime Minister's knowledge, and there was a difference of opinion. And later on, there was a court of inquiry against Musharraf, but then after the battle, after about 2 months, he took over the reins of power in Pakistan in a bloodless coup. Basically, the effects of this war on Pakistan was that it lost face in front of the world also. And then also Bill Clinton turned his face from Pakistan and he said, Nawaz Sharif, when he went to USA, that use any means that you want and stop this infiltration and call them back. To which Nawaz Sharif tried his best in whatever powers that he had. Casualties in this war, as claimed by Pakistan officially, is about 453, but Nawaz Sharif himself claims a loss of about 4,000 plus soldiers, and India's official figures are 527 dead and 1363 wounded. Also, as happens in any war, the bravest of the brave were given gallantry awards, which will run in front of you in the screens, and many citations were also given out to the units and to the brave soldiers. So after the finish of this war, many lessons and firsts happened, like the use of media in the battlefield was one of the firsts in the Southeast Asian region. Or you can say after the Gulf War, this was the battle where the media was there in the battlefield and reporting. Also, the defense spending after this Kargil war went up and a lot of ammunition and arms were purchased. Thirdly, the control of nuclear weapons have to be done in a more systematic manner, as we saw that Pakistan had moved its nuclear arsenal, and if had not been stopped by the Washington Accord, could have snowballed into a much bigger war involving many other nations and many other areas. Also, as usual, when Vajpayee was trying to bridge the gap of differences between the two nations, Pakistan, as usual, was backstabbing us and carrying out infiltrations in a sector and trying to take over the Siachen heights so that they could dominate that area. And after the battle was over, an inquiry or the Subramaniam Commission was also initiated to find out the loopholes and the gaps of intelligence and the gaps of reporting in the Indian Army channel about why these infiltrations were not reported and not heeded and timely action taken. Due to this inquiry, there were many heartburns and many difference of opinion and many heads rolled in the bargain. That is a different story and would be reported and told in another series. Today we have a Kargil War Memorial located in Dras with the poem Pushpa Ki Abhilasha by Makhanlal Chaturvedi inscripted on the tomb with the name of the brave soldiers who fell defending their motherland. So keep following us and listening to this series of the various wars fought by our proud army. Jai Hind.